it would mean to be free. So you'd see and agree that every man should be free. You'd see and agree that every man should be free. Then you'd say it loud, say it clear, for the whole round world to hear. You'd say it loud, say it clear, for the whole round world to hear. joy sings, rise high as the listening sky. Let it resound loud as a rolling sea. Oh, mama, mama, mama. Lift every voice, all you nations. Oh, mama, mama, mama. Every voice, every voice. Every voice.
The fight against
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Black Mentorship Inc.'s Black History Month celebration and our opening event. My name is Ingrid Wilson. I'm a C-suite mentor and volunteer with BMI. I will be your co-host for the evening. Our theme for our events is Propel Black Success. So a little bit of housekeeping. If you have any questions for the panelists throughout the event tonight, please add them in the Q&A. We will aim to answer or address any of your questions through the evening. So joining us this evening is BMI's founder and executive director, Evangeline Chima. Take a nod, Evangeline. Our speakers, Pam Damoff, Member of Parliament Oakville North, Burlington. His Worship Mayor of Oakville, Rob Burton. Colin Lynch, Craig Wellington, Honorable Anita Anand, Member of Parliament for Oakville, and Che Marville. So we are honoring the land and territory today. Halton, as we know it today, is rich in the history and modern traditions of many First Nations and the Métis. From the lands of the Anishinaabe to the Atawandaran, the Haudenosaunee, and the Métis. These lands surrounding the Great Lakes are steeped in Indigenous history. As we gather tonight on these treaty lands, we are in solidarity with our Indigenous brothers and sisters to honor and respect the four directions: lands, waters, plants, animals, and the ancestors that walked before us, and all the wonderful elements of creation that exist. We acknowledge and thank the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation and for being stewards of this traditional territory. So at this time, I would like to invite Evangeline Chima, our founder, to step up to our Zoom podium. So a little bit about Evangeline. So I will start with the professional side of Evangeline. So Evangeline Chima is the founder and the heart of Black Mentorship Inc., BMI, an organization dedicated to fostering the professional growth and personal expansion of Black professionals in Canada. BMI was born out of her personal experiences as a Black professional woman in Canada. Despite having a master's degree in information technology services and numerous professional certifications, she was unable to be heard as a professional within the business world. She experienced bias and the frustration of being unable to achieve her true potential, regardless of her work commitment and her dedication. She realized, more importantly, that she was not alone. Others were on this journey. And she realized that all around her were powerful, dynamic, talented Black professionals and entrepreneurs also experiencing the same career challenges. Out of these situations, BMI was born to inspire, support, and mentor Black professionals to fulfill their potential, to build community, and to promote change. As part of her work, Evangeline helps organizations to create exceptional atmospheres where everyone can thrive. Evangeline has been named one of Black women to watch, and she is nominated for a Woman of Inspiration Award. She's a dedicated community leader with a focus on diversifying the leadership landscape. Her dream is to see every Black professional shine and reach their full potential. On a personal level, Evangeline and I have not actually met in person. We met on a Zoom meeting space during the pandemic, about almost a year ago, actually. So although we have not met in person, this wonderful lady always inspires me to excellence in everything she does, including the creation of these events this month. No matter how daunting the task, she always steps up for all and for her community. Her battle cry and our personal theme for these events has been, Ingrid, we sleep in March. So she's also a very devoted wife and mother of 4 boys. Bring it on, Evangeline Shima. Over to you.
Thank you, Ingrid, for that humbling introduction. Good evening, everyone. I must first give out a shout out to family and friends who joined us from all over the world, really, Nigeria, China, USA, etc. I'm so excited to welcome you to our first Black History Month celebration. I come here tonight as a Black immigrant woman to recognize and celebrate those who have made it possible for me to be here today. Martin Luther King Jr. in his I Have a Dream speech said, I have a dream that my 4 children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I too have 4 children, 4 sons. Like Dr. King, I also hope for the day that my children are judged by their character, the strength of their achievements, and their contribution to society, and not by the color of their skin. I hope for the day I can tell my 4 sons they can be whoever and whatever they want and not worry that I'm not telling them the entire truth. Because as much as I wish it was different, the truth is, as a Black person, it is hard to turn that hope into a reality. To keep moving the stage of Black equality forward, it takes courage. Generations before us have worked hard to stand tall, to demand a world where we all are equal regardless of our race, our color, or our beliefs. But we are not there yet. If my sons are to achieve true equality, I have realized that I cannot let fear hold me back. I cannot let the fear of failure, of rejection, or of speaking my truth stop me from doing whatever it takes to continue to build a more equitable future for my sons and for other Black people. A future where they can truly realize their greatest aspirations, which is why Black Mentorship Inc. BMI has been created. The mission for BMI is to ensure Black people and people from diverse communities have a safe space to learn without fear of being judged, to fill in the gaps and offer Black professionals personal and professional support. As you know, inclusion is strength. Our focus at BMI is to build an exceptional community that allows people from diverse backgrounds to thrive by providing them access to information, skills, tools, and support to enable them to reach their full potential, feel empowered, and to be seen and recognized in the face of a broader community. Last year, we, the Black community, was confronted with the challenges of our past, present, and future. As we struggled to affirm Black Lives Matter, our pain and vulnerability became center stage. Our struggles and our sorrows were exposed to millions of people throughout the world, and we felt raw. I know I did. In the midst of my pain, I wondered, what if nobody ever said no to me? BMI is here to say yes. Yes, you are enough. Yes, you matter. My parents taught me to be fearless, to be bold. They taught me that if I work hard, very hard, I could reach the sky. But for Black lives, that often isn't enough. The sky is often beyond reach because we don't have the support structure to hold us as we stretch. And so my mission through BMI is now to build that framework to ensuring we build upon the sacrifices and sufferings endured by those before us, and to be committed to creating an inclusive, equitable future, and thus build the communities we all want to see. Thank you. At this time, I would like to invite Member of Parliament, Oakville North Burlington, Pam Damoff, to officially begin our event. A brief introduction first. Pam was first elected to the House of Commons in 2015 and was re-elected as Member of Parliament for Oakville North Burlington in 2019. In her first term, she served as the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Health, as a member of the House of Commons Committee on Public Safety and National Security, and as the Vice Chair of the Committee in the Status of Women. In December of 2019, she was named Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Indigenous Services. She is excited about what can be accomplished by working in partnership with First Nations, Inuit, and Métis from sea to sea to sea. As a Member of Parliament, Pam has worked on files including gun control, national security, corrections, violence against women, and women's economic empowerment. Pam is also a great supporter of BMI and has sat as a panelist at our Let's Talk mentorship series, where we discussed providing support for Black entrepreneurs. It is an honor, Pam. Thank you for joining us this evening. Pam, over to you.
Thank you so much, Evangeline, and it's so wonderful to see such friendly faces here, and I'm thrilled to be part of Black Mentorship's Black History Month virtual series. I want to start by acknowledging and respect that we're gathered tonight, as we gather tonight, I'm on the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. As someone who lives and works in the traditional territory of Indigenous people, I recognize my responsibility in acknowledging their perspectives and listening to the advocacy of their interests. 25 years ago, the first African-Canadian woman was elected as Member of Parliament, the Honorable Jean Augustine, and many of us know her, and she has a strong connection to our community here. She secured unanimous legislative support to pass a historic motion designating February as Black History Month. Quarter of a century after this historic motion, we continue to honor and celebrate the contribution of generations of Black Canadians in our nation. Through education and as events such as this one, we celebrate and appreciate the vital cultural impacts of African Canadians in the arts, economy, and society, both locally and nationally. The theme this year is "The Future is Now," offering us an opportunity to recognize the transformative work that Black communities are now doing in helping build a better and more inclusive future for everyone. We want to see a better future now, a future where no one is falling through the cracks and everyone is valued, protected, and respected equally. Over the past year, we've had to take a painful, hard look at the systemic racism inherent in our society, an issue that is not new to those of you here who have experienced it. Ending it is a top priority for me personally and for our government. As a member of the Public Safety and National Security Committee, I've worked closely with my parliamentary colleagues on a study on ending systemic racism in policing. We've heard testimony that highlights the long-standing issues that Black Canadians, Indigenous peoples, and racialized Canadians have faced with the police. I've had the opportunity to work with a local parole officer on issues on the over-incarceration of young Black men. And I'm also a proud ally to the Parliamentary Black Caucus and their work and statement on ending systemic racism. The global Black Lives Matter movement has started new critical communications and brought to light the truth of the system of systemic racism in all aspects of our society that we've previously shied away from. Through my work, I've had the privilege to work closely with my colleagues on work towards reform in many of our country's institutions that have a deep-seated history rooted in racism, including policing, corrections, and healthcare. As we work to expose and address systemic racism in every single institution in our country, we must also provide opportunities and support for Black Canadians to succeed. For too long, Black entrepreneurs and business owners have faced systemic barriers to success. I was pleased to join you for an event that focused on the importance of Black mentorship. And we know that Black entrepreneurs and businesses were disproportionately impacted by the pandemic. To help remove these barriers, our federal government launched the Black Entrepreneurship Program. The program, a partnership between the Government of Canada, Black-led business organizations, and financial institutions, will invest up to $221 million over 4 years to help Black Canadian business owners and entrepreneurs grow their businesses, innovate, and succeed now and into the future. We created the Black Entrepreneurship Loan Fund to help provide Black entrepreneurs and business owners access to capital with loans up to $250,000. These are just a couple of the several measures taken by our government to support Black businesses. Canadian Black business owners and Black-led organizations will work closely with government officials and financial institutions to make sure that we prioritize the needs of Black Canadians. We also know that businesses that embrace diversity at the board and executive level are twice as likely to meet or exceed their financial targets and outperform their peers. And so we've created a challenge working with private sector partners on the best ways and tools to support diversity inclusion in the workplace. I want to thank the I'm drawing a blank on your name, Black Mentorship Incorporated, for your leadership in strengthening Black leadership opportunities in our communities. As an MP, I look forward to continuing to work with you to ensure these opportunities are available to Canadians of all backgrounds, races, religions, and cultures. My office is available anytime, and it's just been a pleasure to be here tonight, and I look forward to hearing the other speakers. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Pam, and we appreciate your support as always. And thank you for sharing that information and and speaking about the intersectionalities between our culture, the indigenous culture. Thank you so much. So moving right along, it is now our pleasure to introduce our next speaker. Is he here? Mayor, his worship, Mayor Rob. Has anybody seen Mayor Rob? Okay.
Okay. Just hopefully he's not having problem with this link.
So okay, so this is why we have the other speakers online. Who wants to go next?
You know, we probably have, Ingrid, I would suggest what you think. We can have Greg go. Yeah. Actually, or we can have Colin go.
Okay. I was actually going to tag Colin. Colin, you're it. Are you available and ready to go? No.
Yes, Colin? Here we go. I am. Took me a little bit of a while to get the mute button working, but I am happy to step in.
Okay, so let Evangeline introduce you, and then we'll go. Okay, thank you, Colin.
You're welcome.
Awesome, thank you so much for that, Ingrid and Colin. Oh my God, thank you for stepping up. While we wait for his worship, Mayor Rob. Let me introduce our keynote speaker to you all tonight. I have the utmost pleasure to introduce Colin Lynch. Colin is the head of global real estate investments at TD Asset Management, where he is responsible for investments in over 680 properties in 20 countries worldwide. Colin was formerly the general manager of global strategy at AMIA, a management consultant at McKinsey & Company, and an investment banker at Morgan Stanley. Colin holds an MBA from Harvard Business School, a Bachelor of Commerce, and a Bachelor of Arts from Queen's University. All were received with distinction. Ooh. Colin has been named as one of Canada's top 40 under 40, a trustee emeritus of Queen University, and a recipient of Queen's Toronto Branch Award. He is a co-founder of the Black Opportunity Fund. Colin is also a member of the board of directors of the Sunnybrook Health Sciences Center and many, many other organizations, where he oversees the university's endowment and investment funds. Colin is a champion of Black excellence and is focused on supporting Black businesses. And it is our pleasure to have Colin here today. Colin, over to you. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me here. It is a wonderful opportunity, and I would like to especially thank the Member of Parliament, Pam Damoff, for her words, very, very inspiring words. And I'd also like to acknowledge that we are, and I am, here in Toronto, seated on the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and it is important that we remember that. I will provide some comments on who I am, and also give you a sense of some key words and phrases that have motivated me throughout parts of my life. But first, I like to share that it is a pleasure to be here. The pandemic has given us so many challenges over the past year. One of the benefits has been to be able to work, however, on causes that we care about, to connect with people that matter to us, and via Zoom to see a bit of each of our personal spaces. I did want to provide you a sense of who I am, my experience growing up, and some snapshots from experiences I participated in as well on some things I'm working on today. Many people who don't know me will look at me and make assumptions on my background. I share with them that I grew up in Scarborough, Ontario, to a dad who worked incredibly hard as a mechanical systems superintendent and a mom who worked and sacrificed as an accountant. They taught me a number of principles: the value of owning real estate, management of personal finances, an appreciation of history, and a sense of ambition. They'd also keep me from getting ahead of myself. Someone once told me, and I quote, "You don't need an IQ test because you're not a genius." But my family would continuously remind me of the realities of being a Black individual in Canada, that you need to work at least 2 times as hard as everyone else, and that you only have a single chance where most other people have 2 or more. It's one of the reasons why my mom made the difficult choice to prioritize homeschooling my brother and myself over her career. So I'd say that most of my elementary years were my parents prodding me along, whether through math class, Kumon, Taekwondo, baseball, swimming, and skating. They also introduced me to music. And by high school, music became a big part of my life. I joined symphony orchestras, concert bands, wind ensembles, jazz bands, and for a while I played for 3,000 people a week. I set goals to improve my academic average every year by 2%, and I let my passion for music grow, eventually doing 100 performances a year. I applied to Harvard College for admission. That's the undergraduate program at Harvard, and I was rejected. Here's the first phrase: it matters more what you do than where you go. Those were the words that Harvard College told me at the end of their rejection letter. Those words were a remarkable gift. They motivated me to finish the Royal Conservatory and to receive an ARCT, to go to Queen's, a university I initially wasn't enthusiastic about, and to make the most of it. I decided to do 2 degrees, but because I didn't initially like living in Kingston, I decided to do it in 4 years so I could get back to the big city, Toronto. I ran an opera company, a student newspaper, sat on governance committees that awarded tenure to professors, co-founded a conference for hundreds of Black youth in Toronto, ran part of Queen's disciplinary systems, and I ran a journal. I set a new goal: to make up the Harvard rejection by getting into the JD MBA program at Harvard. Partially because I thought incorrectly that getting a JD allowed you to change your name to become a doctor. I graduated from undergrad with 2 programs with distinction, with a GPA of 4.0 out of 4.0 in both degrees. But there were failures. In my 3rd year, I interned at a management consulting firm called Monitor. I was the only person not to receive an offer back. That was an embarrassment, especially when I got to tell my friends all about it. My mom gave me the counsel that I was, quote, too much all over the place. I needed a good skill. So I decided to enter investment banking, and through networking, worked for Morgan Stanley, one of the biggest names on Wall Street. It was 2007, a time of using tons of debt to do lots of things. It was a heady time, right before the global financial crisis, and I was there right for it. Lived through 7 or 8 rounds of layoffs. In one morning, both my boss and assistant were fired. But this time of tremendous turmoil turned into a time of opportunity. Mark Carney was governor of the Bank of Canada at the time, and he needed a team to help him create the financial stability plan for Canada. He turned to Morgan Stanley, and I was one of 3 that worked with the governor to create the emergency plan for Canada. During this time, I was working on my GMAT to get into business school, and then writing applications for business school. By January 2009, Harvard Business School and Stanford Business School came. Both admitted me. That same month, Morgan Stanley rolled out a program to lay off low-cost analysts like me around the world. But they excluded 2 people. I was one. But working 100 hours a week burned me out, and by Easter of 2009, I had enough. I walked into the president's office with a letter of resignation in my pocket. This would be the first of many potentially career-changing moments. The letter never left my pocket. In the moment, I thought better than to resign. Next phrase, hard work works. This mantra was the campaign of Sue Wong, an individual who the Premier of Ontario's office sent me to help to become a member of provincial parliament in 2011. It also became my mantra during business school. In my first 4 years I started business school, I wrote the LSATs, I applied to law school, I joined 5 student clubs and 6 community boards. I then spent the next 12 months getting into Harvard Law School and Yale Law School, interviewing nearly 100 people from members of US Congress to senior folks in the corporate world on deciding whether to go. I spent a lot of time thinking, and I ultimately decided to decline both admission letters. Ultimately, law wasn't my passion. The next phrase, follow your passion. This has been my mantra for my life, and it drove several decisions, including the one to join McKinsey after graduating from Harvard. Working for McKinsey is like working for the CIA. It's incredibly tough to get in. It's tougher to stay in. The work that you do is top secret, and you're doing it for some of the most powerful folks in the world. The firm has an intense culture of high performance. You're either going up the ladder or you're going out the door. But I didn't join McKinsey because of that. I've had an intense passion for commercial aviation for my entire life, and I joined McKinsey to work with airlines. But on the second day in my summer internship, which was a Thursday, I was told I would be working with a big Canadian drugstore. This was the second career-changing moment. I said, I'm sorry if the firm made a hiring mistake, but that's not the reason why I'm here. I'd recommend that you talk with Alex Stichter in Atlanta, who runs the airline practice. The next day, Friday, I was told to go pack to go to Chile on the flight leaving Sunday afternoon. I traveled all around the world, doing 100 flights a year, working with airline, airport, aerospace, railway, cruise line, aerospace executives on all sorts of things, such as coming up with the idea for one of the biggest airline mergers ever. But it was another passion that brought this phase in my life to an end. It was an intense passion for Canada, for politics, and a desire to be more balanced. And so in late 2014, I moved back to Canada, recognizing that my career would take a hit for doing so, but out of a desire to be back to Toronto, a city that I love. By this point, I had done a few political things, including working on Barack Obama's 2012 presidential campaign. And so I was asked in January 2014 to help someone who was smart, but seemingly couldn't win an election. That person was John Tory, and I did help. I devoted a significant amount of time at great career risk. 10 months later, he was mayor, and the 10 months that I spent at the senior leadership table for a campaign that grew to over 3,000 volunteers was incredible. 2 months after he became mayor, I left McKinsey. Next phrase, let's go higher. For those that watched the CBC, this was the song that introduced their fall lineups. It was the song that I listened to on those many flights I took around the world, and it became the model of my next 4 years. I moved from McKinsey to Greystone Managed Investments. Greystone was the firm nobody seemed to know of, but owned more real estate in Canada than anyone outside of the government. My introduction came through John Tory. It was John Tory's office that also gave me what would become my greatest challenge, Toronto Community Housing Corporation. By 2015, I was 5 years on the board of governors, we call it trustees, at Queen's, a university that I initially regretted going to, but one that I felt and became incredibly passionate about. I was an outsider on the board, not simply because I was easily 25 years younger than everyone else, but because I campaigned to be on the board, which nobody did, and advocated for deep change. But that would pale in comparison to what was needed at TCHC. I was made chair of the Building, Investment, Finance, and Audit Committee, and after 2 years, vice chair of the board and chair the board of 2 other corporations. The time commitment was intense, and we had no shortage of issues, some of which you would have read about in the newspapers. By my 4th year on the board, my 5 a.m. wake-up calls were back as we dealt with some major crises caused by ethical lapses at the highest levels. I have never experienced leading an organization through a major crisis, but I have to tell you, it teaches you a lot about people. You also marvel at how much you can accomplish on adrenaline, dealing with the lawyers, the media, crisis communication firms, panic board and senior executives threatening resignation, all while you calmly go about your day job and the other boards that you sit on. By April 2019, I had enough. I was fortunate to have been able to contribute to significant change, whether it was securing outcomes for over 20,000 residents in communities impacted by our revitalization programs, such as Regent Park, or increasing the annual maintenance budget from 150 to 350 million, or helping to secure an announcement from Prime Minister Trudeau for 1.5 billion in funding. It was time to return to my day job. Some of the work I did at Greystone as head of strategy resulted in the firm becoming attractive to TD. And so in 2018, TD bought Greystone for nearly $900 million. But by 2018, I had moved into the role that I have today as head of global real estate, now for TD Asset Management. We have investments in over 700 properties in 120 cities worldwide. Leading this operation, which involves more than 100 people inside and outside of TD, has been phenomenal. It's a credit to my boss who took a risk on putting somebody with no real estate investment experience in this leadership role. 2020. My boss has been a huge advocate and supporter. As recently as April 2020, I told my boss that I was on track to resign from all my non-work commitments. As recently as 2 months ago, I was receiving his approval for my 6th new extracurricular commitment. In truth, much of 2020 was a blur. I've joined a number of boards over the past year. The important question is why? For the Toronto Symphony Orchestra, it's to make the orchestra look like our city. That means more Black people in the audience, in the symphony, and represented in the repertoire. Seeing my partner working and treating COVID-19 patients this year spurred me to join the board of Sunnybrook. The biggest unexpected commitment has been to the Black Opportunity Fund, an initiative to raise the world's largest pool of capital, $1.5 billion, for the Canadian Black community. In March and April, I was part of groups of Black charities, nonprofits, and businesses who were hurting. Businesses being charged higher interest rates or denied funding. Charities that were being denied funding. These were difficult and emotional conversations. Then we had May and June and the wave of mergers that we saw. I'm excited to be a co-founder for a national movement of over 250 volunteers who are working each day to stand up a fund that is by the Black community and for the Black community. Over the past 8 months, we've listened to over 1,000 charities, nonprofits, and businesses, and reflected what we've heard in our 100-day report. We're creating an initiative that's national and fully reflective of the diversity of the Black community, gender, sexual orientation, language, region. We've received millions in pro bono support from 10 firms, financial contributions from over 30 corporations, and had hundreds of conversations with media, with government, with business. We're going to build something that is going to make a difference in the lives of not just Black Canadians, but of all Canadians. I'll conclude with 2 phrases. The first is pride comes before a fall. My dad would say this, and it's abundantly true. It's important that I acknowledge many who have supported me along this journey, ranging from my Aunt Veronica, who picked me up and dropped me off many times, my brother, who has been a huge supporter, advisor, and intellectual sparrer, my partner, who's inspiring in her own right, especially as a medical doctor and advisor, and of course, my parents, who have been my chief role models and advisors. I leave you with this second and last statement. Everyone, no matter who they are, monarchs or presidents, needs to go take a poop. We are all people, all with our unique stories, all with our strengths and with our weaknesses. The simple truth has helped me to speak at equal terms with people with very elaborate titles. It's also allowed me to speak at equal terms with residents of shelters. That we are in many ways equal is something that the events of this past year, whether health or social, have reminded us to keep both in the back and in the front of our minds. Thanks again for having me here. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much, Colin. That was amazing. And hard work really does make a difference. So great to share your story. Thank you very much. Mayor Rob, did I see Mayor Rob? Yes. Welcome. So moving along. So I'm going to introduce His Worship and the Mayor of Oakville to the group. So Mayor Rob Burton. So Mayor Rob has served as Mayor of Oakville since December 2006. He has focused his mandate as mayor and member of Halton Regional Council to control growth, debt and taxes, protect green space and the environment, keep community facilities in line with the needs of the community, and make Halton Canada's most sustainable region. Mayor Rob sits on the boards of Oakville Enterprises, Oakville Municipal Development, Halton Healthcare Services, and Conservation Halton, and chairs Canada's Auto Mayors, the Canadian Nuclear Technology Mayors Association, and the Municipal Leaders for the Greenbelt. Environmental Defense Canada calls him the greenest mayor in Canada. He served on the Halton Regional Police Services Board beginning in 2011 and as a chair from 2014 through 2021. During his tenure as chair, Mayor Rob priorities included keeping Halton Region as Canada's safest large community, to keep Halton Police Services Canada's most effective and efficient, and keep Halton Canada's leader in the Sir Robert Peel principles of community policing. Before being elected to public office, Mayor Rob had a successful career as a director and producer in journalism, film and television. And for those of you who did not know, he's best known for starting, remember this, YTV, Canada's youth-oriented television network. I know we all watched it, I did. He and his wife, Wendy, live in Oakville, where they raise their 3 children, and Mayor Rob also cooks too. So Mayor Rob, can you step up to our Zoom podium, please?
I think you're on mute, Mayor. We can't hear you.
I don't think his audio is connected. Still on mute.
We can still hear you, so.
You would that I've conducted that I'd be able to do this. But anyway, all right. Well, thank you very much. I'm tempted to digress immediately from what I planned to say, and I am gonna digress. You need to know that YTV was not my idea, and this is an important part of my style of leadership. I believe, and who I listened to for YTV was my 4-year-old daughter, and she looked at me one day very disapprovingly in the family room after shutting off the TV in disgust and said, "Daddy, TV for us kids." And I wanted to be the dad that related to his daughters. So we were face to face, And I started to say, well, honey, it's because. And Rachel cut me off. Her face got stormy. She's right there. Well, honey, it's because. The way dads say no always starts with, well, honey, it's because. So she cut me off and she said, no, daddy, you make one. So I did. And she went to work for Obama in the White House, and he assigned her to the lucky 13-member task force that wrote the Health Care Act that Donald Trump was unable to kill. I am nothing beside what my daughter has done. Just nothing. My answer for you. I know you want me to read my proclamation for Black History Month, and I will oblige. One thing first that I think is the most important, and that is that every place has to have and has a founding story. And Oakville has an amazing founding story. Oakville was founded by settlers in 1857 when the legislature of Ontario recognized it after 30 years of hard work by 3 groups of people. The original indigenous inhabitants, the Mississaugas of the Credit, who summered and fished in the mouth of the 14-mile creek. I'm going to call them colonizers from the city of Burlington, who bought the 9 of the 16-mile creek from the Crown, and the Black residents who between 1827 and later than 1857 from slavery in the United States. Big groups of founding people lived together, unified by one purpose, and that was, and still is today, of harmony and prosperity. And you all know that Oakville is one of the in Canada, and you know that those 3 founding groups have had huge success. Now, through the 150 history, there's been adversity, there's been setbacks, but Oakville has always moved forward through adversity. And that's the thing that motivates me to keep going. That's the thing that makes me the proudest of our community. And if you don't remember anything else I say tonight, I hope you'll remember my founding story of the 3 groups that created Oakville and continue to welcome others and continue to enlarge that vision. And by your demand, the proclamation. But thank you for letting me first, because really it's more important than the proclamation. This is my 14th nation. When I became mayor, my friend Veronica Tyrell and I decided the way the Black history of Oakville had been kind of forgotten and fallen away needed to be revived. So together we revived which we've conducted every year except in 2020 because of COVID. And I issued my Black History Month proclamation. And it reads like this: whereas through Ontario has been characterized and strengthened by cultures, and whereas from the time of its establishment, people of African and Caribbean descent have made significant contributions to the development and betterment of the province. Whereas the Black community continues to play a vital role within the social and cultural mosaic that is Ontario. And whereas Black History Month was first recognized in Ontario in February 1990, making the anniversary of, the 200th anniversary of the legislation prohibiting the import of Upper Canada. Whereas Black History Month opportunity to remember and celebrate the contribution that African and Caribbean Canadians have made Now, therefore, I declare and proclaim February as Black History Month in Oakville. And I just want to give a little footnote to that mention of Caribbean. When you understand the way the slave trade worked, you understand that what happened was slaves were brought from west to kind of a way station, almost a marketplace in the Caribbean. And then from there, sold into servitude across the really evil part of the United States, the South part. And from there, inherited the that made Oakville what it is today. So really important to know your history. Is an amazing community for keeping its history. Our society and our Trafalgar Township Historical Society are volunteers who devote, they're the elders of the community, but they devote their time and their energy to recording and keeping alive our history. The Oakville Museum, which is funded and run by the town of Oakville, is a very important part of that, works in partnership with the historical societies, and is supported financially by the town council. The Oakville Museum has wonderful exhibits about the Black residents of Oakville, because it's important to make sure that people know the heritage of the place. And when they do, the rest of us and protecting and conserving the heritage of our is across the country recognized as a leader in the conservation and preservation of our. I thank you very much for letting me share these words with you. I promised Evangeline that I would not allotted, and I'm feeling guilty now. I hope it was worthwhile if I did. And thank you very much for letting me bring.
Thank you, Mayor Rob.
Why, Mayor Rob, thank you.
That was excellent. Thank you for sharing the history and of Oakville. I don't think too many people know of that story. So Evangeline, I think, are we going to Craig next?
Yes.
Craig, are you ready to go?
I am.
Go
Okay.
ahead and introduce him.
Okay, I will introduce and you guys go and set up Craig's video. So tonight, it is my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Craig Wellington. Craig has held progressive leadership positions in the public sector and non-for-profit organizations, developing programs in collaboration with all three levels of government. He has developed successful executive education programs for public sector leaders in partnership with prominent Canadian educational institutions, along with the government, on subjects including ethical leadership, information access and privacy, public engagement, accessibility, brand strategy, municipal licensing and law enforcement, dismantling implicit bias, and working through data analytics. He has vast experience working with organizations to address systemic racism and diversity, equity and inclusion strategies for clients in the Canada and the US, and in the media and public engagement areas. He also works he has also done work with clients in the criminal justice and education systems, leading to concrete policy change. Craig also develops dynamic media projects for film, TV, and digital channels, and is a frequent guest on national Canadian TV and radio. He was recently a member of the Toronto Chief of Police Black Community Consultative Committee, and is a current advisory board member of the Black Community Action Network, BCAN, of Peel Region, as well as the City of Mississauga Mayor's Black Caucus. He also acts as a strategic advisor to the Jamaican Canadian Association. And most importantly of all, he's my brother. Welcome, Craig.
Thank you for that. I'm assuming I'm on and my microphones are working and we're all ready to go. Thank you for introducing me, and I'm very impressive, all the speakers, and thank you for such great work that Ingrid and Evangeline, you guys have done in pulling this all together. So what I want to talk about is I'm here to give you kind of a brief snippets of Black history, Canadian history, and the point in time that we're in right now, where the horrific killing of George Floyd last year has led to a global awakening about anti-Black racism. And for a brief moment in time, many of us are finally feeling seen and heard. But it's important to remember, keeping it in perspective, this is just a beginning point. There is still a long way to go. Even in Canada now, we're starting to hear the yes, but it's just in the US. Canada never had slavery. We've never had systemic racism here. And we've even heard that from political leaders here. And these are all false narratives. We've had a very similar journey, but we're a very resilient people. So out of that struggle has come great success. So we've overcome a lot of barriers, and I'm going to take you on a quick journey to provide some brief context of some of the struggles here, as well as highlight some of the lofty achievements that we need to celebrate, not just during Black History Month, but all year round. So, and as I do the presentation, I'm going to share my screen and bring up a brief presentation. I encourage you to post your comments and questions in the chat throughout. Okay, can we get the screen sharing? Trying to do it, there we go. Here we go, can everybody see that? Just nod, yes. All right, perfect. So first, I want to start our journey with aptly with Matthew DaCosta, who is believed to be the first known person of African descent to set foot in all of North America. He was a well-educated free Black man. He spoke French, Dutch, and Portuguese, and was a translator for French and Dutch explorers and traders with First Nations people. He also spoke a mix of Basque and First Nation dialects, including Mi'kmaq. So in fact, the French and Dutch explorers used to have bidding wars over his services. So the first introduction of Black people to Canada was actually very positive. But then with the introduction of the transatlantic slave trade in 1671, the experience of Black Canadians changed drastically, just as it did in the USA. So Canada has experienced a healthy serving of systemic anti-Black racism, and the ripples of which are still being felt today. Lift every voice and sing, till earth and heaven ring. Ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise, high as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun of our new day begun, let us march until victory is won. Stony the road we trod, bitter the chastening rod, felt in the days when hope unborn had died. Yet with a steady beat, have not our weary feet come to the place for which our father's side. We have come over a way that with tears has been watered. We have come, treading our path through the blood of the slaughtered. Out from the gloomy past, till now we stand at last, where the white gleam of our bright star is cast. We are a resilient people, so out of the many barriers and struggle has come countless triumphs, and let me share some with you. I want to take you to Africville, a dark chapter and yet a proud chapter in Canadian history and Black history. Halifax, Nova Scotia was actually built by Black settlers, including free Blacks, escaped enslaved Africans from America, and Maroons from Jamaica, who had settled in a town called Africville. And despite working and paying taxes to Halifax, they could not get running water. They could not get access to services such as electricity, sewage, garbage collection, or policing. And they faced abject racism. To try to get the Black residents to leave, Halifax built a giant fertilizer plant in the middle of the community. Then when they didn't leave, they then built a giant open garbage pit. When the residents still refused to leave, they put an open sewage pit for human waste. They then forced the residents to move, promising them money for homes in Halifax, which never arose, and that they started moving them out. And then they bulldozed each and every home all the way up until 1960. And sometimes residents were given as little as a few hours to pack all of their belongings to leave. The Halifax mayor finally issued an apology for this atrocity just in 2010. So hockey is Canada's game, right? Today we view top Black NHL hockey superstars as a rarity, but that wasn't always the case. So back to Halifax and Africville, they were actually the genesis for the Colored Hockey League of the Maritimes, which is the forerunner for the skilled, innovative, athletic, fast-paced hockey that we see in today's NHL. And the Colored Hockey League existed 22 years before the advent of the NHL. Colored Hockey League, it was started by Black church leaders and Black intellectuals of the time who used it as a rallying point for the community. There was hundreds of players, and they faced abject racism. They were not allowed to use the ice until the white hockey teams had finished using it, and all things were done to kind of destroy it. So ultimately, it went from 1890 until its demise ultimately in 1930 due to blatant racism and the destruction of the Africville community. Canada Post issued a commemorative stamp, which you're seeing on your screen, in honor of the league just last year for Black History Month. And we've come full circle. In 2015, 85 years after the demise of the Colored Hockey League of the Maritimes, and 57 years after Willie O'Ree broke NHL's color barrier, NHL hockey superstar PK Subban made a $10 million donation to the Montreal Children's Hospital. It is still the largest charitable donation in history by a Canadian athlete. Another groundbreaking Black Canadian philanthropist is Michael Lee Chin, president and chairman of investment company Portland Holdings. So Lee Chin's gift of $30 million in support of the Royal Ontario Museum in 2003 was one of the largest philanthropic gifts to a cultural institution in Canadian history. And his more recent donation of $10 million to the Joseph Brant Hospital's redevelopment in Burlington is the largest gift in Burlington's history. So a lesser known story of philanthropy, and I'm going to assume that Colin knows it because it's his alma mater, Queens, by a story of Robert Sutherland, was a Black Canadian who saved Queen's University with his generous pledge. Sutherland, he was Canada's first Black university graduate and the first Black lawyer in Upper Canada. In 1878, the year Sutherland died, Queen's University had lost most of its endowment in a bank collapse. Sutherland had established a successful legal practice, and he left Queen's University his entire estate, which was worth $12,000 at that time. So at that time, $12,000 was the entire annual operating budget for Queen's University. So that saved Queen's University from being annexed by the University of Toronto. So Queen's University exists today because of Robert Sutherland and his donation. So in 2009, in response to a student-initiated motion, the Board of Trustees renamed the Policy Studies building at Queen's University in Sutherland's honor. Sticking with the university theme. So this is a landmark moment in Canada's history and in Canada's history of Black protest against systemic racism. The 1969 Montreal computer riots at St. George William University, which is now Concordia University. More than 200 students decided to peacefully occupy the 9th floor computer labs in protest of the administration's weak handling of complaints of racism against a professor targeted against 6 students from the Caribbean. So the students had a peaceful protest. They were actually in negotiation with the university and coming to resolution when riot police broke into the building. Fires were set. The computers were destroyed, computer cards and computer papers rained down on the street, and below in the streets outside, there was a counter protest as the fire raged inside with people cheering and chanting, "Burn the N-word, let the N-words die" on the street. There was $2 million worth of damage. It is still the largest student riot in Canadian history. So student leader Rosie Douglas, who is pictured in the top right, was sentenced to 18 months in jail for his role in organizing the protest. And after his release, he continued his activism, and he was very politically active as well. He was followed by the RCMP and targeted, and eventually was deported to Dominica, where he was elected prime minister in 2000. So another example of triumph over adversity. Ann Cools. Ann Cools was one of the 97 students arrested during the Montreal computer riots. She served 2 months in jail because she refused to plead guilty in exchange for not serving jail time. Cools became a vocal activist for social justice and was a pioneer in the protection of women from domestic violence. She eventually received a pardon from the Canadian government, and in 1984 was named to Canada's Senate. She became the first ever Black woman senator in all of North America. And in 2018, she retired as the longest serving member of the Senate of Canada. Triumph over adversity. This is just a quick reminder that the need for campus activism against anti-Black racism continues today. These are actually recent pictures from just a couple months ago from a prominent Ontario university, where these are members of a university fraternity with ties to the military. That's a real assault weapon, and to white nationalist groups who were posting pictures online targeting Black students and trying to harass Black students and Black faculty. There's also several faculty members at the university who have used the N-word in class during courses. So even now, faculty members of color at the university are holding monthly days of mourning protests against racism on the campus until they feel that the administration has properly addressed it. So just a reminder that we need to be diligent as we strive for success, because not everyone embraces Black success. And we have progressed from university sponsorship to university activism to university leadership. Dr. Gervan Ferron is the president and vice chancellor of Brock University. He's also served in the Ontario government as a senior analyst at Treasury Board Division, Ministry of Finance, and as an executive assistant to the deputy minister at the Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Rural Affairs. Sticking with the university theme, another noteworthy university leader on top of his many accomplishments is the Honorable Lincoln Alexander, who became the longest serving chancellor in the history of the University of Guelph. In 1968, so the same year that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated in the US, and there were horrific race riots, Lincoln Alexander became the first Black person elected to Canada's Parliament. He also served as Federal Minister of Labor. In 1985, he was appointed Ontario Lieutenant Governor, the first member of a visible minority group to serve as the Queen's representative in Canada. In 1996, he chaired the Canadian Race Relations Foundation, and in 2013, the province of Ontario proclaimed January 21st, Lincoln Alexander's birthday, as Lincoln Alexander Day, and the following year, the Canadian government nationally recognized the same. Jean Augustine, she is the current Maclean's Magazine Parliamentarian of the Year. Jean was the first African Canadian woman to be elected to the House of Commons, the first African Canadian woman to be appointed to the federal cabinet, and the first Fairness Commissioner of the Government of Ontario. She is also founder of the Jean Augustine Chair in Education, Community, and Diaspora at York University that continues to champion social justice today. Jean Augustine, as was mentioned previously, is the reason we are here, because in 1995, her motion before Parliament to recognize February as Black History Month established the tradition of celebrating the important contributions of African Canadians to Canada's history, culture, development, and heritage. And thankfully, we have a number of African Canadian politicians who have followed in the footsteps of these political trailblazers, with many more to come. And here's just a few Black Canadians who have had federal or provincial elected office. And there's many more, and many more still who have held local government office, and many more to come. Here's Judge Stanley Grizzle, a civil rights and labor union activist who rose from working as a railway sleeping car porter, which was one of the few jobs available for Black men at the time, one of the few decent jobs. So he rose from that to be appointed an officer of the Ontario Labor Relations Board, becoming the first Black Canadian to hold a position at this level of provincial government. And in 1978, he became Canada's first ever Black citizenship judge. As a soldier in World War II, Stan challenged the common practice of having Black soldiers serve as butlers for senior white officers. After the war, while working as a railway porter, Stan organized workers under the banner of the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters, and he served as the local chapter president for over 16 years. And in 1954, Stan led activists to Ottawa to challenge the federal government for a more open immigration policy for Caribbean immigrants to Canada. So we've evolved from a time when Black men in Canada could only hope to get hired working as sleeping car porters on trains, to a time where the Greater Toronto Airport Authority is headed by a Black woman, Deborah Flint, who is the president and chief executive officer of the GTAA, and who is revolutionizing one of North America's busiest airports. Here's Marianne Shad Carey, who was an anti-slavery activist. She was an advocate for the rights of women and a pioneering woman newspaper editor and publisher. She was the first Black woman publisher in all of North America and the first woman publisher in Canada. Shad founded and edited the Provincial Freeman, which advocated equality, integration, and self-education for Black people in Canada and the US. She also established a racially integrated school for Black refugees in Windsor. And in 1994, she was designated a person of national historical significance in Canada. So following in the footsteps of pioneering writer, publisher, editor, and journalist Marianne Shad Carr, we have a number of accomplished African Canadians who are excelling in this space in various mediums. And here's just a few, and again, many more to come. Another arena I'd like to showcase is science and technology. We have Elijah McCoy, who was a Canadian-born inventor and engineer whose parents escaped slavery in the US through the Underground Railroad. He is famous for holding 57 US patents, most having to do with the lubrication of steam engine. And of course, the term "the real McCoy" was coined for Elijah McCoy. So following in the great pathway trailblazed by McCoy are many brilliant leaders, Black leaders in science and technology. Marcus Extavor is a physicist and engineer. He's the executive director of prize operations and energy and resources for X Prize, including leading the $20 million NRG COSIA Carbon X Prize, which is a global competition to recycle CO2 into valuable products. Marcus actually worked for me for 2 summers when he was in high school, when I was head of marketing for Caravana. A really great guy and hilarious, and also plays a number of instruments, including the saxophone and steel pan. Dr. Juliet Daniel is a professor in the Department of Biology and the acting Associate Dean of Research and External Relations in the Faculty of Science at McMaster University. Likan Olawoye is a founder and CEO of Black Professionals in Tech Network. The organization, the BPTN, is the largest of its kind in Canada and the 4th largest in all of North America, with over 10,000 members. Dr. Lisa Robinson is the Division Chief of Nephrology at the Hospital for Sick Children, a senior scientist at the Research Institute at the Hospital for Sick Kids, and a professor in the Department of Pediatrics at the University of Toronto. Taylor Williams is co-founder and managing partner at Acora Capital, which is an investment firm focused on water infrastructure, technology, and services. And he's actually a former pro athlete. He played football in the Canadian Football League. Dr. Kevin Hewitt is a professor in the Department of Physics and Atmospheric Science, and he's a chair of Senate at Dalhousie University. He co-founded the Imhotep's Legacy Academy, which is a STEM outreach program for African Canadian students. So this is just a brief snippet. I just wanted to give you kind of a little bit of context of Canadian history and showcase just a few different areas where we've had significant success. And what I encourage you to do, look up, there's hundreds of these success stories. Just share a handful of them, find them, research them, celebrate them, be them, not just for Black History Month, but all year round. I want you to think about, how many of you, I hope, learned some new information and maybe some new context today. And we encourage you to share your insights and questions that you have in the chat. Unfortunately, most of these stories aren't taught in our curriculum. So you only get snippets during Black History Month presentations and snippets on TV and so on. But all Canadians need to know these stories because Black history is Canada's history. So thank you very much. And I'll turn it back over to our wonderful hosts.
Wow. Thank you so much, Greg. That was amazing. The reason why we're here, taking us through history and bringing us back to present. Thank you for that. Didn't know uncles served 2 months in jail. So many sacrifices. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, are we ready to rock? Are we ready to move? It is now my pleasure to introduce our performers, Alpha Reading Roots, founded in 1999. The founder of Alpha Reading Roots, Alpha, is from Guinea, West Africa, and he is based here in Toronto, Canada. He has a bachelor's degree and also worked as a planner, project manager in the corporate world in both Europe and Canada for over 15 years. Alpha Roots was created as a source for the best professional melodic musical instruments sold worldwide and developed into a multitude of music related services. If we're all ready, Alpha, over to you. Let's go. Thank you. That was awesome. We enjoyed it, Alpha.
This is Walter, Derek, and Alpha. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Can you guys hear me? Yes?
Yes.
Thank you, Alpha and African Beats. That was excellent. And we are going to move next to introduce, it is my pleasure to introduce the Honorable Anita Anand, Member of Parliament for Oakville. She was first elected as a Member of Parliament for Oakville in 2019. Minister Anand is a scholar, lawyer, researcher, and mother of 4 children. Born and raised in rural Nova Scotia, she moved to Ontario in 1985. Minister Anand and her husband John raised their 4 children in Oakville. Minister Anand is a devoted leader with a proven record of service. In her Oakville community, she has served on the board of directors of the Lighthouse Foundation for Grieving Children, the Oakville Hospital Foundation, and Oakville Hydroelectricity Distribution, Inc. For the past 2 decades, Minister Anand has been a legal academic, employed most recently as a professor of law at the University of Toronto, where she held the J.R. Kimber Chair in Investor Protection and Corporate Governance. She served as an associate dean and was a member of the governing board of Massey College and the director of policy and research at the Capital Markets Research Institute, Rotman School of Management. She has also taught law at the Yale Law School, Queen's University, Queen's again, and Western University. Minister Anand holds a Bachelor of Arts Honors in Political Studies for Queen's University, a Bachelor of Arts Honors in Jurisprudence from the University of Oxford, a Bachelor of Laws from Dalhousie University, and a Master's of Law from the University of Toronto. She was called to the bar in 1994. Over to you, Minister Anita. Is she here?
I'm here.
Okay, excellent.
But I can't undo my video.
Oh, maybe Jeff can help. Jeff, can you help with that?
I'm trying. No. Do you want me to start anyway, or?
Yes, go ahead if you don't mind. Thank you so much.
Hold on a second. Jeff, can you right click on Minister Anita and, try to,
Okay, he's messaging me here. Start my video. Okay. I think it's gonna work. The host has asked you to start the video. Yes, start my video. There. I started it, Jeff.
I'm still not showing.
No, it's still not showing.
He keeps asking me. I keep saying yes. Yes, Jeff, I'm starting my video.
Okay, it's probably setting, that's fine.
Can he just unclick me?
I don't think he can do that.
No,
he has to ask you and then you have to accept.
Maybe he could ask me one more time. We just try one more time. Okay, he asked me one more time. Here I go. Start my video.
Oh, it's trying. It keeps flickering as if it's trying, but it's not happening. If you're okay, do you want to go ahead?
I can. Okay. I can go ahead for sure, except you don't get to see my really nice red sweater.
You can send us a picture.
Okay. Well, at least there's a picture there anyway.
Yes, there is.
And you don't get to see my messy desk either. Well, listen, thank you so much for that very, very generous introduction, Ingrid. And I'm just so grateful to be invited here this evening. I can't tell you what an honor it is to speak with you all this evening. And I just want to give you a perspective, perhaps from the federal government, as well as from the ministerial role that I occupy in public services and procurement. because I've been doing some outreach with the Black community in terms of diversifying the supply chain, diversifying procurement practices, and I'd like to talk a little bit about that. But let me just start by saying something that's already been said before this evening, but I think we need to mention it again. And I was really touched by Craig's remarks in particular in terms of the history that we got to hear. And I just wish every Canadian could hear that, because that to me is what we all need to hear over and over again, so that we can truly all appreciate the depth and the expertise and the amazing character of the Black community and collective here, right here in our own country. So let's start with Black History Month. We know that 25 years ago, the Government of Canada officially declared February as Black History Month. And it was thanks to the Honorable Jean Augustine, Liberal Member of Parliament, Liberal Minister. She was the first Black woman Member of Parliament, the first Black woman Cabinet Minister in Canada. And I find just even saying those words quite moving, because this is now I'm going into my second year in political life, my second year in cabinet, my second year as a member of parliament. And I look back at what Jean Augustine accomplished, and I say to myself, especially as a visible minority woman myself, she was a true trailblazer. She blazed an incredible trail that we are still trying to understand and live up to. But without her, I think we would not have come this far in the federal government process. So while this is an important milestone to note, 25 years, we have to really recognize that Black people have shaped Canadians from coast to coast to coast for over 400 years, well before this country was even called Canada. And to me, Black History Month is about honoring the enormous contributions that African Canadians have made and continue to make in all sectors of our society, not just here in Oakville, but across this country. It's about celebrating resilience, innovation, determination, historical contribution to work towards a more inclusive and diverse Canada. I especially appreciated this evening hearing about the influence of Black Canadians in Nova Scotia, because I was born in Nova Scotia and I know that history myself. But I don't feel that everyone in this country knows the important history of that province and the important contributions of Black people. So this year's theme, The Future is Now, is something I think we just have to stop and say slowly to ourselves. The future is now. What does that mean? The future is now is a chance to celebrate and acknowledge the transformative work that Black Canadians and their communities have made in the past, but are making right this very moment. Black youth, Black frontline healthcare and essential workers, Black parliamentarians, Black judges, Black academics, and the pictures that Craig put up this evening are so important in helping us to understand the meaning of the theme, The Future is Now. Why? Because the future is now is a call to action. It's a call to action to recognize the contributions that Black communities in Canada have made and will continue to make. It is a call to action to remind us to continue our efforts to combat systemic racism in all of its forms, to build lasting equity an equity that is informed by Black lived experiences. And it's with this foundation and this appreciation and willingness to learn that I come to my role as Minister of Public Services and Procurement, where I am working to leverage federal procurement to achieve social and economic policy goals. And these goals include increasing the participation of underrepresented groups in Canadian society. This is part of the Government of Canada's commitment to pursue economic empowerment for marginalized communities, to increase diversity in procurement, and to support Black entrepreneurs. And in the wake of the George Floyd murder, I said to my department, we aren't doing enough in federal procurement. That's not the case everywhere across this country. People had to come to terms with the George Floyd murder in their own ways. But for me, it was a call to action to step up federal procurement and diversity efforts. And while we were committed to diversity, it was a moment where I think we all stopped to say, racism exists in our country, racism exists in other countries, and we're not doing enough. And so I asked my department to target opportunities to Black owned and operated businesses. I reached out to the Black community for advice on how we can do better in procurement. And we then launched 9 open procurement opportunities with the goal to award contracts to companies owned or led by Black Canadians in multiple regions across the country before the end of this fiscal year. These pilot projects will provide the department and the federal government with the opportunity to identify successes and lessons that we can learn to better support opportunities, to better support economic growth for Black Canadians while helping them to inform, the expanded use of targeted approaches to increase diversity in future procurements. So you heard the word procurement many times. Basically, that means federal contracts. And what we want to do and what I want to do is say to Black owned and led businesses, the federal procurement process is not exclusive. It is open, it is diverse, and we will do better to bring you on board and to show you that there are opportunities for Black owned and led businesses in the federal procurement process. So that's all to say that our government is committed to supporting the success of Black entrepreneurs and communities across the country. Why? Because we recognize that Black entrepreneurs contribute to the strength of our economy and the vibrancy of our business and larger national community. We know that there are systemic barriers. But by the same token, we know that we need to do something and do something now. And that's why our government announced the first ever Black entrepreneurship program to support Black entrepreneurs across the country to grow their businesses, to thrive, with an investment of up to $221 million. To conclude, we have a long way to go to dismantle systemic barriers and systemic racism. But we all have a role to play in fostering a more inclusive community. And one of the reasons I ran for office in 2019 was because I felt I could play a role like this, that I felt that I had to do more in my lifetime to support diverse communities, to provide opportunities to Black history, Black voices, and Black lived experiences. There's no question that we have to work together, but I look forward to working with you and everyone in Canada to do better and to be better. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Minister and MP Anita. We are so grateful for that. And yet, we need to do better. And it's a collective action. It's not something one group versus the other has to do. So thank you. Right now, everybody, all of our participants, we are really encouraging you to participate. So let's talk. Let's talk about building strong Black communities. And as you know, that needs courage. So in the chats, in the QA, I'm inviting everybody to put in your comments, put in your questions. If you have any question for any one of our speakers, please do so. We're gonna do that, give you a little bit time, maybe for 5-10 minutes, depending on how you participate. So let's go, let's talk. Jeff, I'm going to rely on you to look at the chat and see if there is any questions, any comments in the QA.
Yes, I'll let you know of any that come up.
Thank you, Jeff. You're doing awesome, Jeff. Woo. Thank you. Okay.
I have a question. Are co-hosts allowed to ask questions?
Of course.
Oh, okay. And I didn't put it in the chat. Sorry, I'm not good at following rules. Mr. Craig, I would like to know why so much of our history is so hidden. I mean, it's not just that it's not in the curriculum. You know, you're my brother, but every time I ask you to present or something, I hear about new things that I didn't know about before. Why? How do we get this information out?
Yeah, I mean, I think the main thing, Ingrid, is that you don't listen to me enough, and that's been going on since I was a little kid. But yeah, I mean,
good. This is on Zoom. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, the challenge we have is until it is built into curriculum, it doesn't exist. And I mean, the erasure of history of Black stories and something that's been going on for centuries. I mean, again, we look at the history of Black people in Canada. Black people in Canada existed in slavery longer than Black people have existed free in Canada. So you're talking about in order to ensure that and maintain that type of chattel slavery and people as property, and again, the Black and Indigenous people in Canada and the US are the only people here who have been enslaved on North American soil. So it's a very unique and shared history and context, and there's no coincidence that Black and Indigenous people are you find on the lowest rungs of many social economic indicators, and it's because of that history. I mean, it's, you know, other people may have come as, you know, refugees, as immigrants and so on, but being property by law is very different. And to maintain that, you have to have a mindset where you dehumanize them. I mean, the US, Black people were actually written into the Constitution as 3/5 of a human being. But you have to strip away the history, you have to strip away the successes in order to support and justify treating people as less than human beings. And there was a time in Canada that you were able to import Black people as slaves, and using the same rules and laws as furniture. It was actually the same policies and language. So in order to maintain that philosophy, you have to first strip away the identity, the history, the culture, and so on. And once you've done that for centuries, it becomes very hard to erase it. You know, that's not an easy thing to erase, and you're not going to erase it in 1 or 2 generations. So we're taking steps forward, and there's significant more steps to go. But a big step would be to make sure that these stories about Canadian history and Black history are ingrained in the curriculum, that everybody can learn it, not just people of color, not just Black people, but Canadians, because these are Canadian stories. The stories I told are Canadian stories. So why aren't all Canadians hearing the story?
Thank you for that. Jeff, do you want to help us and read the other questions we have? I think we have 2 questions. So let's start with the first one from Selena Young.
Absolutely. So Selena is asking, how can we change police services across the province and country to check their racism and stop targeting Black men especially?
Was that question for anybody in particular?
It wasn't. No, it was just an open question. So I believe anyone can take it on.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to touch that one?
I gotta plug in my microphone. Hold on.
There you go. I could certainly, yeah. Well done. Excellent.
There. Start and someone else can say something, but I think one of the things that we've seen with the over-policing of Black Canadians, and in particular Black men, I think we need to start changing the way that policing is done. We can't keep doing the same thing that we're doing and saying that we need to train, that we need to recruit. Those things don't actually change change the system. We know in Toronto there's far too many young Black men who are in prison, and they're in prison because of poverty, addictions. They're not in prison because they've come in contact with the law any differently than a lot of young white men, but they haven't had the opportunity for representation in court, for a number of and they've come in contact with the law, period. Whereas that same young white man may be smoking well, it's legal now, so smoking a joint's a bad example, but having drugs. The over-policing is a huge issue. So I think, dealing with the systemic racism is absolutely a problem, but we also need to look at the over-policing of communities, and that's Black communities, it's Indigenous peoples, particularly out west, that puts them in contact with the law. And maybe someone else wants to add some input on that.
Yeah, and I can, it's Craig, I can jump in again, and those are excellent points. Black Toronto residents, according to the Ontario Human Rights Commission report that came out last year and one just before, Black Toronto residents are 20 times more likely to be killed by police than white people in a study of Toronto police. Black people are 3 times more likely to be charged with drug possession than white people, though Black and white rates of drug use are exactly the same. So absolutely what it is about systemic racism. It's about unconscious bias. It's about the weaponizing of Black skin. But this is not just a police issue. So the important thing is to understand what we're talking about is systemic racism, which flows through all systems. So the police are part of the system. So if we have racism in society, we're going to have racism in policing. We're going to have it in accounting, in law, in auto mechanics. It's what have you. It's part of our system, in the education system, and so on. But what we have to do is, and that was those excellent points, is take an upstream approach, because for the most part, what we tend to do is do downstream approaches to law enforcement, which is if you look at the river and there's tons of people you see floating in the river drowning, and what you end up doing is throwing them a life raft and trying to save them, when what you should be doing is going upstream and seeing why are so many people falling into the water. So more and more communities, you're seeing across the world. Glasgow is a huge example. At one point, not too long ago, Glasgow led Europe in murder. And what they took was a public health approach to solving it. And they lowered murder rates by 60%. And it's about understanding that the root causes of violence are the same everywhere, and they have nothing to do with police. And if over policing was the cure for any kind of criminality, then the U.S. would have the lowest crime rate in the world. They're over militarized, there's excessive policing, and they have the most incarcerated population in the world. So that's not what the cure is. So what it is about looking at social issues. What can we do in terms of creating an environment with opportunities for hope, where you're removing barriers for communities of color, for communities, and the reason it's communities of color, because communities of color tend to be in the lower social stratum, again, because of systemic racism. So the issues are issues of poverty, issues of so on. So.
Thank you so much, Greg. I wanted us to get to the next question so much. So let me invite everybody, and Selena that asked the question, on the 25th, we are actually having a conversation with the police department, the Halton Regional Police. We're partners.
On the 18th.
Sorry, on the 18th. Thank you for that. On the 18th. So register, come be part of that conversation, come have a free conversation with them and ask some of these important questions that we have on our mind. And go ahead, Jeff, let's get to Christine's question, please, and then we'll move on.
Okay, so Kristen McIntosh, she asked, so how do we make a change to the curriculum then to include the truths of our Canadian history and context? We know the books aren't right, so what are we doing about it? We need to educate the full truth, Kristen says. Open-ended again.
Who's gonna take this, but please make it brief so she can, talk to us.
Yeah, so I'll jump in. It's Colin. I think it's a similar answer to the one that Craig had alluded to, and Member Damoff had talked to. We need to change the representation of the people that hold power in terms of how textbooks get approved, purchased in education systems. So that's the directors of education, the school board trustees, the superintendents, etc. Because those individuals have influence on what the curriculum is in the classroom. To say nothing about we need more Black teachers and more principals. That's clearly important as well. And there are organizations that are pushing on this, and they need our support, and they need Canada's support, in many different ways, including financially. So we need to lift up the organizations that are pushing this, and we also need better representation in the decision-making ranks that drive curriculum across the country.
Thank you so much for that. I think we can take one more question. Chair, I beg of you. Jeff, go ahead.
Okay, so an anonymous attendee is asking, what specific actions can we take as allies to the Black and racialized communities to provide support and take real action as individuals and in our personal lives? It's not a specific 21 again.
Yeah, I think there we go. There we go.
That's a really broad question. I think number one, asking the question demonstrates the change that we are in and that we are looking for. That everyone recognize, number one, that we're human beings, that we are all human beings, and not one of us would want to be treated as less or inferior. And so that when we are in organizations and we are in educational settings where there are people of color, that we don't just see them as people of color, but we see ourselves as living together collectively, and that their stories and our stories are all a part of the same body. We are not separate. And so we have to see ourselves in each other. And I think that question is a good beginning to actually doing that.
Thank you so much for that, Che. Okay, quickly, let's go for the last one, and that will be it. Jeff, go ahead.
Okay, all right. Cindy Thomas, she's asking, first of all, she says, thank you for all being amazing human beings and sharing your views and support of Black History Month. The government programs mentioned tonight is amazing, but do you think it's enough? How does it compare with other race groups in Canada? And how do we ensure that it is sustained for a longer time to right the wrongs, and not disappear when Pam, Anita, or Rob leave the office?
So I'm going to jump in with my view because I've expressed this. I think two really important points. Point one, present government has done more for the Black community than any other previous government, financially, through the procurement, through a number of different avenues. I think that's super important to acknowledge and to recognize the contributions, especially from the elected members here with us today. That said, we've got a long way to go. So we need, and this is borne out in our conversation tonight, but even in the success of our community in this country that Craig pointed out, we need to change exceptions to make more the norm in terms of the accomplishment, and then we need to root out the systemic discrimination we're talking about and the overt anti-Black racism. I think that means that we have sustained investment from not just the government of Canada, but the provincial governments to root this out, and that's real, whether it's change in law, process, policies, and financial investment. We need a significant amount of that, in my opinion. How does it compare to other communities? I don't have the stats on me. My hunch is, however, that we've got a ways to go to make up relative to other communities. And candidly, as a Black community in this country, we are starting from a space where we were, call it, an unequal economic foot, and COVID didn't help. So we need even bigger investment going forward.
Can I just jump in there? It's Anita speaking. I want to say something that I think is important for the way we think about systemic reform. I don't think our current system was designed to be equitable. So it's not about simply changing existing structures. I believe we actually have to implement new structures and new norms and new ways of thinking about race and racism. This old system is a racist system. We have all seen it and experienced it, and we have to acknowledge it. And so let us do that and then say, what do we have to do to change the current reality in which racism and indeed systemic discrimination is part of it? And that's why I think that government programs are definitely important, and thank you for that acknowledgement about the contributions of the federal government. But in reality, it's not just governments, it's not just the federal, provincial, and municipal governments here. We actually need to change the way in which individuals perceive Black Canadians and the contributions that they have made and will continue to make, in my humble opinion. And I just think that we are just at the very tip of this iceberg now. We have a long way to go. And I just am so grateful that this conversation tonight has happened, but we need to have it way more often with way more people so that we can keep chipping away at this iceberg. Thank you.
Thank you. Absolutely. That was right on. Okay, Ingrid, over
Sorry,
to
I want to ask something though. When is Colin running for office?
Yeah, hell yeah.
Perfect. Great question.
Let me go ask my boss.
Colin, you call me. I want to talk to you about it.
Thank you. Ingrid, over to you. Thank you, Pam.
Thank you all. So I have the pleasure of introducing our closing keynote speaker. You heard her speak a few minutes ago, Che Marville. Che is a wellness pioneer, CEO of Elivrem, executive coach, certified international yoga and meditation teacher, producer and host of the Let's Talk podcast with Che Marville. Her podcasts are phenomenal. So Che, over to you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much, Ingrid. Thank you so much, Angelina. I'm so overwhelmed and grateful to be here and to know what you all are doing, because mentorship is critical to actually building success. You know, over the last 30 years, I've held a number of leadership positions. I was senior advisor for wellness for the UHN. I was the executive director of the first Children's Own Media Museum. I was the first social science researcher at the Ontario Science Centre, which was a position that was dedicated to looking at the relationship between science and bias. I spent the first 10 years of my life studying anti-racism and how racism operated, as well as sexism and all the other isms in relationship to science, research, and how we treat human beings. First thing is that we know that race is a social construct. It is not a biological and genetic known thing. It's not fully real. Yet, our experience, our heritage, our stories that have not been told have been because Black has been seen as inferior and has been denigrated, especially over the last 600 years. And we know when we listen to Craig that I actually think Craig should write a book. You know, he should write a book about what he's noticing, because part of why these histories are not told is because many of the people who wrote our history, who write our history right now, do not share and see our stories, right? So Craig, there's another job for you. I know you have 17, but there's another one. Another thing that we know is that even though race is not a biological reality, we know that there are social determinants of health because of being a racialized human being. That people who are racialized, specifically Black people, are treated differently by the healthcare system. That when you live in poverty or in a lower income, you have less chance of getting great healthcare. That you have less chance of having access to great food. We know that there are many communities where there aren't even grocery stores within the community and people do not have access to fresh food. So how can you grow and live and be propelled towards success when you don't even have the basics to build and look after your well-being? So that's one thing that has to also change. How we manage and grow into healthy human beings. But the other thing that's so essential in terms of being a human being, just like all the other human beings, is that our mindset, how we think, matters and changes how we deal with a word that has not been said tonight. And it's a word that actually only exists because the other word of success exists. And that is the word of failure. We don't talk about failure enough. And we talk about discrimination. We talk about who's left out and all the reasons why we can't get to the table. But there's one thing we rarely talk about, and that is what you do when you fail over and over and over again. And believe you me, and everyone on this panel will tell you, to be an entrepreneur, to be a professional who's successful, it means that you have looked failure and brokenheartedness and rejection in the eye and walked through it. You cannot be propelled towards success without knowing what failure is. And why this is important? Because what's needed right now, especially after COVID, especially after an economic downturn, especially because of what we've experienced, because of the transformation happening in healthcare, you have to keep going. No matter how many times you hear no. You see, here's the problem with no. Sometimes when we hear no, when the door closes, when the bank doesn't give the loan, right? We think, I'm not good enough. I don't belong. I don't fit. And what I want to say to all of you is that sometimes we don't fit, but what that means is that there is an invitation, and that invitation comes from your actual birthright to create a new space. A number of our colleagues at the table here, on Zoom, said it tonight. They used the word resilience. This word is undervalued. You see, what Black people have demonstrated through slavery and through all that they're going through, up to how they are treated still in 2021 by law enforcement. Law enforcement who we pay, who we invest in, we ask for help. We are resilient. We push through the crevices, and people don't talk about that enough. We talk about the successes. We give a list of who succeeded, but who didn't? Who didn't? And why didn't they? You see, right now, it's not just about equity. It's not just about creating opportunity. It is about creating a mindset that says, I will persevere through COVID. I will persevere through wearing a mask. I will persevere through what is happening with my job or losing my company. Because let's be straight. Black and brown people in the last 12 months, right, have lost not just in terms of health, but many people's businesses have been destroyed, have lost their careers because they are on the front line, have been made to feel, have been vulnerable because they are the ones who are doing the customer service. What we aren't also talking about is that there is a technological revolution happening. The only reason that we can come together right now is because we have access to technology that is growing and expanding. When we look at the entrepreneurs and businesses that are succeeding right now, it is because they are technology and telecom organizations and corporations. So what should we encourage people to do? Become coders, learn about coding, learn about the literacy of technology, learn about how to move forward no matter how many times you hear no. Look after your body. Pay homage to the ancestors that have come before. Not just the Black and brown ancestors, but our indigenous ancestors who continue to fight and survive. You see, resilience does something beyond just surviving. Resilience creates the bones and the muscle of endurance. And endurance allows you to be awake. I say to you, I say to all of you, to my colleagues on this panel, and to all of you that are listening, let us not be asleep through this revolution. Let us not just focus on what we have lost. And some of us have lost so much, right? Let's learn from what we've lost. Let's study what's happening next. Let's be afraid and still walk. Let's adapt. Let's grow. And then, not just through government services and support, but organizations like this one that is saying mentorship and modeling and relationships. That is what makes us successful and propels us forward. My friends, you know, many of you know I'm a meditation teacher. I spend most of the day breathing, so I love to get excited in the evening. I say to you that this is a moment to take many, many deep breaths and to look outside and see ourselves in the trees and see how they're rooted to the ground and that they feed the world and the earth, and know that we belong here. We belong here. And the last thing I want to leave you with is that the rising of people of Black and African descent isn't just about liberation from suffering. It's not just about all the young men and women who are taken advantage of or mistreated in the prison system or by law enforcement, or left behind in school because of low expectations. No, my friends, the challenges that we are having economically and ecologically are related to the fact that we don't use the diversity of intelligence on this earth. And when you let everyone come to the table, when you create lots of space to try, to fail, to make, what comes from that are new designs, new ways of seeing. There was a time we didn't even know the word Google, and now it's a verb. Yes, this is a new beginning. Let us breathe. Let us listen. Let us hope together. Let us love together. And let the natural potential that is in each of us, Black, brown, and whatever, rise. I thank you for this time. I'm grateful for this space. I look forward to continuing the conversation.
Wow. Wow, wow, wow. Yes, we belong here.
I love you, girl. I love you.
Oh,
You just rock.
breathe.
Just breathe.
I love it. I love it. I love it. Ingrid, hasn't this evening been so like enriching, inspiring, motivating? Like, girl, give me your words. Ingrid, you're mute.
So, I mean, it's been amazing. I know it's 8 o'clock. Just give us a few minutes just to close off. Thank you so much. We are collecting the questions. There was a few more questions. We have collected them. We will get a response and we'll get it out on the BMI website. You know what, when Evangeline approached me in mid-December and said, can we do this? And I told her, let's go. We can get these people together. And then 3 weeks later, I said, we can't do this. But listen, all of you speakers, all of you who stepped up beside us, you guys are phenomenal. We really, really appreciate it. And Jeff, thank you for volunteering your time and letting these two ladies boss you around for the last several weeks. We love you.
Awesome. So much. And thank you, everyone. Like Ingrid said, don't drop off. We have a little music, just at the end, and we want you to enjoy it with us. But don't forget, follow us at all of our social media pages at Black Mentorship Inc. Visit our website, www.blackmentorshipinc.ca. Don't forget, every Thursday throughout February, we have sessions, we have celebration. Join us. Look out for all information to register and be part of this conversation and this inspiring and propelling Black forward. And yet, please donate to us. This is how we keep going, you know, this is how we keep these sessions running and providing our services and programs to you. Moreover, providing mentorship to Black professionals, Black entrepreneurs, Black immigrants, Black students, youths. We need your support. Enjoy Wade in the Water. Jeff, over to you. Thank you, everybody. Jeff, we're waiting for you.